Claude, smile. You helped me set up the camera. Okay, okay. And we're good. Thank you. Oh, God. This camera is not properly set up at all. It's like bad. Hello and welcome to another episode of It Came From the Page. And today we're going back to the past. So this is a very dumb video. People might hate this video, in which case, I'm sorry. But this is kind of inspired half by, so Coffee Cats and King is doing monthly wrap-ups months after they have, happened. And I just think it's very fascinating to, kind of go back and, I'm like, oh, I'm really impressed by how well he remembers and how well he's intelligently able to talk about things, even though months have passed and he's read so much more books since then. So I was like, oh, what is the farthest I can go back in time where I will have an idea of what I was reading and watching? And it seems like, as far as I can tell, since I was taking any type of logging of my watch lists and my read list, it seems like for books, the farthest I can go back is April of 2019. So we're going back to April of 2019 to do a monthly wrap-up for that April and see how much of these books and movies I remember or have anything to say about. So a little flashback. So I was living in a different city. I was living in Calgary, Alberta, which is a very fun place to live. It was very nice. I like living there quite a bit. But I was working a very, very unhealthy amount in a warehouse. So there's actually not a whole lot to talk about. I think there's only about 10 things, 10, 12 things overall. And that's including both watching and reading. And as such, I was actually probably the most fit that I've been ever at that time. So this is before I had the stroke. So I used to do running a lot. And on weekends, I would do 10K. I would even try to get 30K some weekends. And I was really trying to run and do at least 10K worth of jogging or motion every single day. So as such, I was listening to a ton of audiobooks whenever I got the chance. So let's just kind of get started and see what I was doing and what my memories are about this specific time in 2019. So first up, I read the original Jurassic Park. This was an audiobook. I remember reading this because it was one of those books that I was on a super long run while listening to. I'm sure I didn't listen to it all in one day because that would be 6 to 8 hours of running. So I don't think it was that crazy. But it certainly was a big chunk of it was, I remember running across, because there's this in the city, there was this huge long river, and you had this amazing running path that you could just run for kilometers and kilometers through. So I remember I was doing a long distance run and I was listening to Jurassic Park. So I have a fairly in-depth memory of that book. I love that book. I love how it's a little bit darker. I remember something that really struck me is how much it really does kind of seem like a survival horror game. I would not be surprised if somebody who made say Resident Evil video game had read Jurassic Park even before it was the feature, because it has these moments where Crichton will be like, they have this many weapons, they have this many bullets for the weapons, and blah 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 blah, and you're like, oh, this is fun, but it's also maybe it's a bit too much information, but you can really kind of get into it because you're like, oh my god, there's a dinosaur coming, but he only has this weapon. Oh, can he take it out? And it's very fun. I love that Hammond is just a piece of shit in the book. He's just the worst human possible, and I love what happens to him in that book. There's this entire thing where there's Carnotauruses who are camouflaged, and that's something that none of the books or any of the other things in Jurassic Park extra media have ever tackled. So I loved that sequence, and it really stood out for me because I was like, oh wow, this is so cool, and this is not something that was from the original the movies or anything like that. So you really got into some extra stuff, and yeah, I really liked it. I love how Gennaro in the book is this badass lawyer who's super muscly and buff, and you're like, hell yeah, and he's just destroying all these monsters and stuff. And then it ends with it ends very differently from the movie. And overall, I think that I do like the movie more than the book, but they are so different. I decided not to include that in last Tuesday's video because the differences are just like too extreme, and they're both really, really great. So I just decided not to include that in my movies that are better than the book. But yeah, I love the original Jurassic Park. The next on the thing is something I don't remember anything. So a bit of explanation. I At this time in my life, I was writing for a horror website, and part of that was I would come up with articles, I would pitch the articles, and I would write the article. And I was in the smack dab in the middle of writing a series of blog posts on every time the Universal monsters appeared in comic books, which is ridiculous. And I should never have tackled something that monumentally stupid big, because it's a lot. But what I was noticing is that legit every single one of the Universal monsters had at some point in comic books crossed over with Sherlock Holmes. And I was like, what is going on? So I decided to pitch a thing to just like free up a bunch of space on the other lists and just be like every time Sherlock Holmes met one of the Universal monsters. So I was doing tons and tons of reading for that. I was doing tons of research for that. And some of these comics that you're about to get are from that. And I believe before I submitted and finished that, I broke ties with the website. So I stopped writing for the website after having a very heated debate over how much I hated the movie Terrifier. And it did not go well. And I cut ties with that website. But yeah, so these are remnants of like half an article. These are comic books that I would have read on the weekend. So this one is The Dark Detective, Sherlock Holmes, Volume 1. I have absolutely zero reference to this. Like, apparently they're like fighting this is like where Sherlock Holmes is fighting a chimera. What? It looks cool. Like, it was described as like Hammer Horror meets Sherlock Holmes. I apparently didn't like it very much though, because I only gave it 2 stars. Well, what was my review? What was my review on this? The only review I can find for me saying anything about this was incredibly cliche and taxing. What does that even mean? So yeah, apparently that's not a good book. It looks cool and sounds cool, but apparently I didn't like it. I don't remember anything about that comic book. Next up, something I do remember a little bit more is I was also, at the same time, I was writing for a website called Scriptophobics, where I had like I think it was Toku Tuesday, where I would do tokusatsu, things that related to tokusatsu. And tokusatsu is Japanese special effects. By this point, I had reviewed a lot of the more popular Japanese Godzilla movies and, Ultraman and stuff like that. So I was kind of branching out to things that were affected or were being kind of inspired by tokusatsu, which is how I got to reading this barrage of Gorgo comics. So Gorgo is a movie from... See, I have the Blu-ray in my hand. So yeah, so this is a movie that was made in 1961. And the comic books, they're Charlton Comics, which is like a really kind of like a budget comic company. They had, for whatever reason, they were in line with Steve Ditko, and Steve Ditko was the man who like created the look of Spider-Man. So he was the one who was the artist for all those original Spider-Man comics. He also did a lot of early trippy as hell Doctor Strange comics, and Steve Ditko is one of the bigs in terms of comic book artists. So he had written a number of Gorgo comics, and I read all of them. So there is a so he did not write. Sorry, he was the artist for a bunch of Gorgo comics. So there was like this big omnibus that I still have. It's just too heavy. I don't want to show it on air. It's hard to get over. It's hard to lift. Okay, but it has all of the Steve Ditko comics from that run. So he didn't actually do every single issue of Gorgo, but he did like a lot. And like the art is like pretty damn good, and those stories are very fun, very cheesy, very much like a monster of the week. What's Gorgo getting into now? And what's nice about those Charlton comics is all of them are public domain. So what happened is I decided to read all of them that month. So I did start and focus on the Steve Ditko ones first, but then I was like, oh man, I want to read all of them. So yeah, they were a lot of fun. So I remember really enjoying the Gorgo comics. The art was awesome. It's just very silly. There's all kinds of great plots in there. They're very much like 60s comic books. So like if that's your jam, then yeah, you probably like this. Next up, let's go to something else that I legitimately remember nothing about. This is Sherlock Holmes, Steam Detective. Huh? What is this? Okay, so let's see. Look, the revelation of the Hound of the Baskervilles story and the progressiveness of an Adler/Holmes in this comic is what gets this an extra star. So apparently there's Hounds of the Baskervilles, and there's something that was progressive about Adler and Holmes. So I gave it an extra star. So I guess I didn't like it that much either. And this is Sherlock Holmes, Steam Detective. I'm sorry, some of these I'm like, I don't remember these comic books at all. Speaking of Sherlock Holmes comic books that I legitimately remember nothing about, and it's even worse that I don't really remember anything about this one because I rated it 5 stars. This is Sherlock Holmes. Well, sorry, it's just A Study in Emerald. So this is that Neil Gaiman, like, he's the writer on this. The Sherlock Holmes meets Cthulhu, I believe. I believe it was like a Cthulhu thing. It's like very short. It's like only like 88 pages. And I was like, oh, let me look at my review to get a better idea of what I thought about this. Nope. All I said is, say good. Thanks 2019, Andrew. You're not helping anyone. The cover looks really cool, A Study in Emerald, but the hell if I know anything about this book. Next up, this is one I do remember, which is Michael Crichton's The Lost World. So this is the sequel to Jurassic Park. And it's funny this comes up now because somebody, when I was talking about my movies that were better than the books, somebody was like, oh, the sequel to Jurassic Park is like super racist? Good to know. And I was like, oh, I made a mistake. Because like, The Lost World, Jurassic Park The Lost World, is not the same as The Lost World. So The Lost World by Arthur Conan Doyle, which is from the early 1900s, and then Michael Crichton, when he had to write a sequel, Michael Crichton was like pressured to write this sequel by Steven Spielberg, where he's like, please write us another Jurassic Park story, please, Mr. Crichton, and he's like, fine, I'll do it. And he does, but he just took the name The Lost World from that earlier thing. So the Jurassic Park The Lost World, I mean, it has like, I believe both of them have like a few iffy bits in regards of Costa Ricans and how they're treated, but overall it's not nowhere even minorly or majorly close to the racism in the original 1900s Lost World. So just clearing that up now. I actually like the Lost World quite a bit. I love that, like, Malcolm just comes back. And, it made sense in the movie, but definitely didn't make sense in the book. Because Malcolm was dead in the first Jurassic Park book. Spoiler alert. But the thing is, apparently not. He just comes back. He, comes back with, it's like, nah, bitch, he's fine. He's good. There's nothing wrong with him. He's super cool. And you're like, okay. This one is fun because you can see a lot of influence from the original Jurassic Park movie made it into Michael Crichton's views in The Lost World, because the Sarah Harding in the Lost World book is much more openly feminist and does a lot more than Ellie Sattler does in the first Jurassic Park book. And you can tell that Laura Dern's performance of Ellie Sattler in Jurassic Park really influenced Michael Crichton as to how he would write a female in the second book. So that's why one of the things that I really like about The Lost World, I love Levine. Levine is this unlikable piece of shit scientist, and he very clearly was probably based off of Professor Challenger from the original Lost World. So I love I love that. He's so much fun when he's like, yeah, actually, dinosaurs are like this, and you're like, he's just like a paleo nerd. Like this is the guy is like paleo Twitter just walking around. You're like, look at it's that guy, it's that guy. And I also like how there is some really fun villains in this one as well. Action is good. I remember an action set piece about like people hiding under some kind of a jeep, but I couldn't tell you the exact plot of this one. This one's like a little less clear than Jurassic Park is in my mind, but I still remember liking a lot of these characters, and I really did have a good time with it. So I should like go back to The Lost World sometime soon. Next up is the Halloween, the official movie novelization. And this is not the Halloween movie novelization that's like from the 70s. This is the one for the David Gordon Green 2018 movie that I read the novelization for. I remember, so this is something I used to do as well. I used to read a lot inside of coffee shops where I would spend the night, or obviously not night, I would spend the day hanging out in a coffee shop and just drinking coffee and reading. That was something I used to love to do. I don't do it much anymore because, I kind of got out of the habit when the pandemic hit, but, sometimes when Loomis is being super annoying, I should probably just go out and go to a coffee shop and read one of these days. Probably get more done. But yeah, I read the digital version of this too. It's like the only reason you should ever read a novelization is because you have a physical copy. I don't know why I read the... Anyways, this was better than the movie because I don't like the movie. I do not like that Halloween 2018 movies very much. Like, it's not the worst movie ever because the sequel was way worse. Halloween Kills was way worse. And the thing that a lot of things that I don't like about the Halloween 2018 movie, I like a lot of like the comedy bits and some of the dumber things. I think that the way that after seeing that movie, reading the novelization, it made it more fun. Some like the dumb things were more fun in this one. And the worst jokes were not in the novelization because clearly they were improv. So it was like, oh, thank God. Like the worst jokes didn't make it in. So it's just a more palatable version of that. And also like the Dr. Sartain stuff is even more fun and stupid in the book because they keep bringing up the pen. And it's very, very funny. And I'm like, oh, this is fun. It's one of those things that made me slightly like the movie a little bit better. And also the fact that the freaking Halloween Kills exists, which would make anything better. I own the novelization for Halloween Kills. I should get to that and see if that makes it better. But yeah, and also I do want to read the novelization for Halloween Ends as well. I actually kind of like Halloween Ends. It's very stupid, but I'm at that point I was in. But yeah, Halloween the official movie novelization. It's alright. It's alright. What did I say in my thing? Fleshes out the film in a great way and is my preferred way of experiencing this story. So if I ever do that sounds so pretentious. It's my preferred way of experiencing this story. It's like, shut up, nerd. God, 2019 me was pretentious as fuck. But yeah, if I ever do a video called 5 novelizations that are better than the movie, I guess this one's going to be one of them. And last but certainly not least is a book called Kaiju for Hipsters by Kevin Derendorf. So this was a great book. The title might, the title is more kind of like tongue-in-cheek. It's a way to recommend obscure kaiju films that you might not have seen before, you might not have heard before. Kevin Derendorf has been writing there. He has a blog called the Mazer Patrol blog that he's been running for years, and it has all this like really in-depth and great info about Godzilla and everything Gamera, Ultraman, all of the tokusatsu stuff that I know and love. So I was really excited to read this book because it has a lot of great information. It has a lot of great recommendations in it. I watched a ton of stuff from this that I had never seen before, and you will actually see that when we go into the movies in a second. But yeah, I absolutely love this book. I really hope that Kevin Derendorf writes more books because I like his writing style, and I think that this was like top tier. If you are all interested in watching more like kaiju movies or just so interested in the genre at all, after just getting the typical Godzilla Gamera movies, I would definitely recommend Kaiju for Hipsters. Fantastic book. And those were the books I read. So yeah, as you can tell, like there was not too many books that I read. A lot of those, other than there was really only 2 audiobooks. I was kind of surprised because yeah, the 2 Jurassic Park books were audio, but everything else was like digital. Like so, it wasn't physical, but it was reading it digitally. So I had like ebook copies of those. So yeah, I do need to. I probably own those terrible Sherlock Holmes comics, and I should go back and read them and see like what were they about. I don't remember anything about them, so I don't know. So now this is everything I watched in April. Now I used to be a huge nerd for movies. Like that used to be my main thing. Like I would watch a lot more than I would read. I would just have a lot of ambient film knowledge. That has kind of dropped in the waysides as I've been reading more and more and more. But 2019 was kind of in that middle of that transition period from being more of a film lover to being more of a book lover. So this is kind of the in-between. And as such, it's kind of like equal. So yeah, so let's go and talk about it. So first up, on the 5th of April, which is nice about Letterboxd, it will tell you exactly when. I could have told you exactly when, because on Goodreads, those are also, like, popping around. But I watched the remake of Pet Sematary, so that's the 2019 Pet Sematary. I really liked it. I would be interested to go back now to watch it. I think I watched it, did I watch it last year? Yes. Yes, I did watch it last year. Oh, man. The old memory noggins. I did rewatch the Pet Sematary remake last year because I had finally read Pet Sematary, the book. And yeah, I like that it does something different. It's not fantastic. It's not going to blow your mind. It's depressing because it's a freaking Pet Sematary. So, it's not going to make you happy. But I thought it was a pretty cool remake because I think it adds enough where it can be different. It's not better than the original film. I think the Mary Lambert film will always be the number one, but I did love the kitty cats in the Pet Sematary remake, and I was following all of them, and then one of them died, and it was so sad. So I'm still attached to those little kitty cats that were like on set of the movie, so that probably has something to do with it. But yeah, so I watched that in theaters. And then I rewatched, so you can tell, so this is when I was rewatching a lot of stuff from things that were recommended or mentioned in that Kaiju for Hipsters book. It really had an influence as far as me going back and exploring older things that I had either seen before or not seen at all. So Kamen Rider J was one of those, and this is like a straight-to-video, home video, little special release in 1994, so it's the only time Kamen Rider, he got big. He became like a big old Kamen Rider and was like Ultraman, and he was like fighting things. But for the most part, he was normal size. Kamen Rider is a guy who looks like a grasshopper that's on a motorcycle and he kicks people. It's like kind of like Power Rangers, but he's the only one. I love Kamen Rider. There's been a bajillion Kamen Riders. I have seen a fair bit of Kamen Rider, nowhere near all of it. It is very fun. It's still going on to this day. Always new Kamen Rider stuff. And it's just now slowly coming out in the North America because finally Shout Factory is releasing like Blu-rays of those original Kamen Riders. So, and a lot of them would be on Tubi. So if you're ever interested in Kamen Rider, I would recommend going on Tubi. But Kamen Rider J was one of those special in-between because Kamen Rider had stopped in the, I believe it was like the late 80s, early 90s, and then there was a gap between that and when the new stuff started in the late 90s. And Kamen Rider J was one of those things, the straight-to-home video kind of 45-minute, 50-minute thing that was kind of released in that interim between franchises. So really fun. You could watch it on its own and not have any other explanation. I love Kamen Rider J. Really fun. And then, surprising though, when I rewatched Scream, I'm always watching Scream. I close my eyes, I'm watching Scream right now. Scream is one of the greatest movies of all time. So yeah, of course. There's no reason for it. I just watched Scream again. Because Scream rocks. Actually, there might have been a reason for it, but I don't remember. And then on the 20th of April, 420, I watched a movie called The Perfect Date from 2019. So this is back when I had and was kind of releasing regularly a podcast called Milkshakes and Mimosas, which was a podcast devoted to the television show Riverdale. And because there was only so many episodes of Riverdale that came out a month, we would have to fill in time with other things. So The Perfect Date was a movie that had like a co-star, like that was co-starring one of the actresses from Riverdale. So I believe it was Camila Mendez. Yeah, so I believe it was Camila Mendez. I'll put a little thing if I was incorrect. Who is the co-star of The Perfect Date. And it was like one of these straight to Netflix like romantic comedies that were not very funny and not very romantic. There's plenty of those. But yeah, I watched it and then talked about it on a podcast. And I remember that podcast because I was extremely hungover recording that podcast. Again, I can't tell you why. I mean, it looked like I watched Scream the night before. Maybe I just got hammed watching Scream. I don't know. I don't know. Maybe I was like, drink a shot for every time they're drinking beer in the movie. I don't know. But yeah, so I was very hungover for The Perfect Date. And as such, it was I believe that was a Sunday. That was a rough Sunday. Next up, a movie that I absolutely hate. I watched Avengers Endgame in the theater. I can hate Avengers Endgame. It's garbage. It's very bad. I remember I was watching this. In Calgary, where the closest theater to my house was in this like little strip mall, and in this was in this little mall. And at night, when you would go see like the late show, the only things that would be open would be like the movie theater and then the bar. There was like a bar downstairs that you can get to in like 5 seconds. And this was back when I was like running, so I was like super fast. So I was like always going. Boop, boop, boop. But Avengers Endgame was so terrible. I remember like every time I was bored, I would just go down and order another shot from the bar and then go back up and watch the movie with the hope that I would find the magical spell to take the one shot I needed to make the movie good. Didn't work. The movie sucks. I hate the Avengers Endgame. It's bad. I hates it. I hates Avengers Endgame. Next up, this is more stuff from the, so I watched 2 of these movies, both of these on the same day. Both of these were because I read Kaiju for Hipsters, and that is Orochi Strikes Again and Daikon Films' Return of Ultraman. Now, both of these are Hideki Anno joints that he made before, like, he was doing, like, big things like Evangelion and stuff like that. I don't really like Hideki Anno that much. I certainly don't like Evangelion. I hate Evangelion, actually, but that's a topic for another time. These 2 films are very interesting to watch now because, like, Orochi Strikes Again is a kaiju movie, and, of course, Return of Ultraman is also a kaiju movie. And these are things that are very weird now to watch because Hideki Anno was involved in the newest in the newest Ultraman that literally just came out. So there was a movie called Shin Ultraman that literally came out last year. I saw it, quite good. I really liked that movie, which is a little bit of a surprise given how I'm not a huge Hideki Anno fan. But it's very funny to go back and watch when he was like making like films like these, which like were unofficial and they're just like weird things. So this is just Daikon Films' Return of Ultraman is really interesting, and Orochi Strikes Again was kind of interesting. I don't think either of those are really something you need to watch unless you are like a kind of a completist. They didn't blow my mind for any reason, but it was very interesting to see somebody who would eventually go on to do more high profile and legal Ultraman films. See, like they're fan films essentially from back in the day. So yeah, those are what I watched and read in April 2019. What were you doing in April 2019? What was your life like? Were you doing cool things? Were you kick flipping? I probably could have kick flipped back then because I was fit and it was nice. Now, post-stroke, I walk 3 kilometers and I need to take a break because my brain is like, no, and half my body barely responds half the time. So, it's a different world. But there was no Loomis back in 2019, so, this is why I got more reading done. Thank you guys, and if you like this video, please let me know. And if you hated this video, let me know too. Just say mean things if you want to. It's your life. Bye.